Thanks so much. Everyone hear me? First of all, I appreciate you all coming in. Appreciate Gemini. My name is Bryan. I am on the product team at Chainlink. I work with a number of our DeFi products. I work on some of our cross-chain stuff. And just stoked to be here, talk a little bit about Gemini and the DeFi stuff and CeFi with you guys. You want to do a quick introduction real quick?
Hello? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Werner. I'm a product manager at Gemini. I handle all things that touch the blockchain. So if it's adding assets, custody, staking, DeFi, anything to do with smart contracts, cold storage, all that is all a part of my team. I originally got into crypto in 2017 when I got an email from Coinbase. I was an engineer at the time. They asked me to lead their payments platform. I ended up being the engineering manager for the crypto engineering team there for 2 years. I joined around 100 people, and I left around 1,000 people 2 years later. It was a lot of growth, a lot of crypto jumping in the deep end. Worked at protocols like Definity, and I really like working in crypto, and I love talking about it, so this will be a lot of fun.
Everyone, thank you for coming out. As Bryan mentioned, my name is Robert Collura. I'm a director of solutions architecture at Chainlink. I've been with Chainlink for close to a year now. I got started in crypto doing some early cloud mining with Genesis, and then I started, from there you go down the rabbit hole, you buy some Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then from there you look at all the crazy ICO mania, and it just goes on from there. But for me, Chainlink made a lot of sense when you look at the promise of smart contracts and Ethereum. You need oracles, and from there you go down the whole Chainlink rabbit hole, and here we are, years later. Looking forward to the talk tonight. Happy you guys all came out, actually.
Definitely. So some of you may be a bit new to the crypto space, some of them not. But in my view, we're still very early. Even some of us who've been around in the crypto space, either hobbyists or professionals for the last 8-10 years, it's still early. So curious, Matthew, what kind of trends are you seeing both in the retail and institutional in these days? What kind of trends are you seeing?
Yeah, so most of my friends, when they ask me about crypto stuff, they're concerned with the retail stuff. So like, what did Dogecoin do? Is the Bitcoin price up or down? Someone sees Bitcoin price go down 5,000 and they ask me, is crypto over? And that's pretty common because it's what we're exposed to and it's exciting. And that's the stuff that's really engaging and headline driving and all that kind of stuff. But that's not really where the really important things are happening. It's really interesting for all of us to talk about it, but what we're seeing is that there's real institutional interest in crypto because it's becoming legitimized in a way that we haven't seen in the past. I was around in 2017 when they said institutional money is coming, and it just never did. But that's changing, and we're now having conversations with institutions where we need to figure out how can we provide the types of services that they expect coming from traditional finance, because there's so much more rigor put into how traditional finance operates for things like Bernie Madoff rules. The custodian has to send the reports directly to the person that has assets with them. They can't go through the money manager. I had no idea that was a thing before working in crypto, and that's the kind of conversations were happening with institutions because they need to have those things in place, and crypto wasn't doing it because we didn't need to. But those are really important things that are happening, and it's a lot of stuff you don't see, and it's not very sexy, but it's very bullish for the industry as a whole.
Makes sense. So I'm sure the institutional retail trends that you're seeing today shape your roadmap. And a lot of people say the coolest things get built when people are not talking about the crypto space, and the darker bear markets actually pull out the coolest innovation. I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about Gemini recently announced their eFill product. It is a token wrapped, powered by Chainlink's Proof of Reserve. Do you want to go into a little bit of detail? What is it? And then we can talk a little bit about the benefits and why you guys are investing in it.
Yeah, so we're going to get a little bit in the weeds on this, but you guys can do it. I believe in you. So you've got Ethereum. It's its own network. They all speak the same language. They communicate to one another, and they have like smart contracts, and you have decentralized applications and all that kind of stuff. It's all a closed ecosystem. And then you've got Filecoin, which is another network over here, and it's a different ecosystem. It's different nodes, different transactions, same idea. It's still a cryptocurrency, but it doesn't speak Ethereum. So in Ethereum, all the interesting DeFi things are happening. You can now trade in DeFi in decentralized exchanges without having to use a centralized exchange like Gemini. So that's really cool. But Filecoin's way over here. It can't do the DeFi things in Ethereum. So what you need to do is represent this asset in Ethereum using tokenization. So there's a thing called ERC20, which is just the, they call it Ethereum Request for Comments. And it was a proposal by someone, and it was the 20th proposal. So they call it ERC20, and all it does is say, this is conceptually what a token can do. You can have a balance, you can send it, you can check this, you can mint more of them. It's just the standard how you could represent the idea of a token within Ethereum. So what we did was we created a wallet on Filecoin that when you deposited Filecoin into it, we would mint ERC20 tokens in Ethereum. So that every time someone put Filecoin in, you'd be able to represent that Filecoin in Ethereum and participate in DeFi. And what that allows for is these like segregated networks and these segmented markets to start to participate with one another. So now when Filecoin starts to do more interesting things, their value goes up, stuff like that, you can trade it in Uniswap. And if you don't have a token of Filecoin, there's no way to do that because they don't speak the same language. So when we talked to Chainlink and we let them know that we were interested in doing this, they told us about this idea of proof of reserve, where they'll monitor the Filecoin addresses that hold the reserves that back the token and verify that we have the reserves we say we do when we mint more tokens. And it helps keep us honest. And I think it's an important thing for a centralized player like Gemini to be held accountable by a decentralized player like Chainlink. Because like the last thing that we want to do is violate the ethos of decentralization. And I think there's an important role that central organizations have in this space, but you can't just come in and start doing all the decentralized things as a centralized organization because it kind of defeats the purpose. So this felt like a really good relationship, and like once you guys brought it up, I was like, yeah, let's do it. That sounds great.
It's, you know, truth, not just trust, and kind of what the reserves look like. Do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, how you decided to go after Filecoin? And the obvious question is, cool, are there others?
Yeah, so we learned a ton by doing Filecoin. We were working with CoinList, who was helping with the Genesis block on Filecoin. There's a lot that goes into launching a new cryptocurrency network, so we were helping with that as a custodian. And when we talked to CoinList, they said, you know, we'd love to tokenize this as well, so we worked with them on that. And one thing that I learned personally with tokenization is that I kind of had this idea going into it that you should just tokenize everything for the sake of tokenizing it because it's like, it's more compatible, it can do things in DeFi, and like, why wouldn't you want to tokenize it? And I learned that like, unless you really need the ability to transfer within Ethereum specifically, you probably don't need to tokenize it. Like, you have to have specific reasons for building these systems, otherwise you're just making noise in the ecosystem. And we'll probably talk about it more with like DeFi topics and stuff, but tokenization is bigger than just Ethereum. And the more that Ethereum is expensive and it doesn't launch ETH2 and Polkadot and Avalanche, these other projects are doing really interesting, you know, comparable things, you're gonna see tokenization mean interoperability in general between these different networks because you can tokenize Filecoin to Ethereum. You can also tokenize it to Polkadot. You can tokenize Ethereum to Polkadot. You can tokenize Polkadot to Ethereum. It just becomes about representing your asset in a different place. So I'm sure that we're going to do tokenization more in the future. And it's going to blur the lines so much that a lot of this tokenization stuff will just become a part of interoperability in general.
Just for the benefit of some of the audience, the term you hear a lot is a wrapped token. In the early days, you saw WBTC, and you've seen a lot of really successful projects. Can you just give a real quick, what is a wrapped token versus a token that we're all accustomed to?
Yeah, the wrapped token is specifically the reserve represented by an ERC20. So there are ERC20s out there that are just native tokens to Ethereum, like BAT or 0x. These things are just tokens in their own right. They aren't representing something else. But when you wrap something with an ERC20 standard, it's tokenizing some underlying asset or collateral. And so wrapped assets like wrapped Filecoin is collateralizing some reserve of Filecoin. Wrapped dollars is what we call stable coins. Wrapped gold is like Paxos does that, I think. And there's like others. You could tokenize anything. And like honestly, down the line, we are going to see tokenization of real world assets like real estate and legal contracts and intellectual property. And like you get all the benefits of a trustless exchange between two parties with anything that you're collateralizing. Like all the art you see in NFTs these days, you're like, yeah, I get it. I could download the JPEG. I don't see what the big deal is. But like representing ownership in intellectual property or some like mortgage or something, like that's really what we do today, but it's kept in a filing cabinet at City Hall. There's no reason that can't be digitized and have real value in being able to prove that you own it. And so like all the use cases today are like contrived because we're just figuring out the tech. But like anyone that's in the space can see, connect the dots and see where this goes.
So Matthew really got my interest going. Robert, he just mentioned real estate as part of this kind of initiative. Let's go a little bit deeper. What exactly is Proof of Reserve? How is Chainlink enabling it? What are those different kind of use cases out there? Let's start with that.
Yeah, so Chainlink Proof of Reserve started about 15 months ago. You mentioned WRAP BTC, WBTC, REN BTC were some of the stable coins. These are all like rehypothecated assets or assets that represent something on one chain, and they're on they're on another chain as Matt mentioned. And one of the things in DeFi, or one of the things you have to look out for is if I'm a protocol and I want to, or let's say I'm going to go to some issuer to go get WRAP BTC, I want to make sure that when I give like BitGo my BTC, and I get a WBTC back, I want to make sure that they're not stating more, they're not under collateralized. What I mean by under collateralized, they're issuing more of the wrapped asset than what's actually there behind the scenes, right? So we're all aware of the whole, the Tether FUD. Does Tether really have the money they say they have there, right? And we thought it was a great idea to provide transparency, accountability. And Matt, you hit the nail on the head saying that, look, you're a CeFi player, you want people to adopt the wrap version of Filecoin. And you've taken the onus to come to us, and we're talking about how we can provide transparency. So how do we do that? It is a Chainlink price feed. That Proof of Reserve feed can be launched on any one of the chains that we support, and it allows protocols to say, hey, a good example is with Gemini with EFIL is like, they cannot go, Gemini's minting contract cannot go and mint more of the wrapped version of Filecoin than what's actually in those custodial wallets on the Filecoin chain, right? The same thing with BitGo, with WRAP BTC. We're basically telling our users that want to use Proof of Reserve or work with us that you have to include the Chainlink Proof of Reserve feed into your minting contract so that the issuers can't go and have an under collateralization scenario, right? And so that's really the premise. How do we do it? It is a traditional price feed, but it is looking at custodial wallets that are on chain. It could even be a fiat account for a centralized stablecoin that's off chain. Like we also have Proof of Reserves for centralized stablecoins as well, right? And the whole idea is to bring accountability in terms of some sort of representation of that on a blockchain. We check those wallet addresses every 10 minutes, so it's not like you have to wait a quarter to get some, report or an attestation from a traditional, organization. One thing we're not an audit. It's not like an attestation or an audit, but we're constantly checking those wallet addresses to say, hey, do they have, does Gemini, did anyone take any of those Filecoins in those custodial wallets and move them, or are they trying to issue more wrapped Filecoin than what's available, right? And DeFi protocols can leverage the proof of reserve as well, because let's say I'm a lending and borrowing protocol like Aave, and I want to accept deposits of wrapped Filecoin of e-file, right? I could say, I'm going to check the Chainlink price feed. I might turn off the ability to accept further deposits if, for example, the Chainlink Proof of Reserve feed says that there's more e-file actually issued than what's actually in the custodial wallets, right? So DeFi protocols can also leverage the proof of reserve to say, hey, let's check this as well, and say, you know what, I don't want to accept more wrapped BTC deposits or some synthetic asset or wrapped asset because they're under collateralized now.
So I'll ask you first, but feel free to jump in. Like, why Chainlink? Why partner with Chainlink to do this? Why is Chainlink the partner that can make this successful for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in this space since 2017, and I remember when Chainlink launched, and it was like the first real legitimate oracle in the space. And so we've had conversations with Chainlink in other capacities before we were working on wrapped Filecoin, and it was just kind of this relationship that we would share the things that we're working on and kind of talk about things that they were interested in doing. And when we started talking about wrapping Filecoin, I don't remember who it was over there that they said, oh, well, we're working on this proof of reserve thing, it could line up pretty well. And honestly, it's really easy to hook into. So I was like, yeah, why wouldn't we do this? When we wrap the Filecoin, we reference the Merkle from the transaction for the Filecoin. So we can't mint any unless we have a transaction in Filecoin to corroborate it. And so we were confident that we'd pass any kind of audits that they're going to be revealing. And we were like, yeah, we'll give you the addresses, you could monitor them, and it was really easy to plug in. And I was like, yeah, let's link this. I think we talked a lot about making it a standard in the industry so that centralized players don't go the route of Tether, and they kind of go the route of open, transparent reserves.
Robert, where do you see proof of reserves kind of evolving? The DeFi space, we have no idea where it's going to lead. What do you see?
I'm going to piggyback off what Matthew was talking about earlier. Real world assets, right? That's fascinating to me. Chainlink, we are working with a project, or have a project called Curio Invest, where they tokenized a Ferrari TDF, right? So there are hungry investors out there that may not be able to afford, a Michael Jordan rookie card or a Tom Brady rookie card that are worth millions of dollars, right? But what if there are players out there that said, look, we're going to buy the Ferrari and we're going to put it somewhere and we're going to issue, you can buy $50,000 chunks, tokenize it, right? But how do you know the Ferrari is there? How do you know that it's still in the garage, that it didn't move? So what's fascinating to me is starting to incorporate IoT sensors or things that will track movements of perhaps real world assets. So that's something that is fascinating, or at least you look at movements of gold, right? So who knows, do any of the vaults audited? Do we even know if the COMEX has what they say they have? So, and again, we're looking for, there's no doubt, I'm in the belief that we're going to tokenize so many things in the future, but how are you going to prove that they exist? And there are players that want to be transparent, right? They don't want to hide. They want to work with regulators. They want to instill confidence in their investors. And to me, I think we'll see. We're starting to have discussions with certain IoT players and things like that, where we can gather sensor data, GPS data, even video data, things like that, to prove that certain things are available, that they move, or where they're at, and track them, so on and so forth.
Cool. Just to kind of wrap a bow on kind of this the understanding around proof of reserves and how it works, Robert. We talk a lot about trust and truth. Let's focus on the on-chain. Can you talk a little bit about how does the Chainlink network, distributed dons. Don't go too deep, or however deep you want to go. How does it actually, say, read what's on chain and report back to folks like Gemini? How does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Gemini obviously has a list of wallet addresses, right? Those are provided via an API. What happens is we have 10 nodes, Chainlink nodes. None of them are operated, of course, by Chainlink Labs. They're operated by our node operators. They're actually the ones that are reading data on, they're looking at the wallet addresses on the Filecoin network, the blockchain, right? And they're constantly pinging those to say, hey, what's the balance? What's the balance of these actual wallet addresses? Once those Chainlink nodes have that balance, they're able to aggregate that. There's 10 nodes actually that are operated. They're able to aggregate that and come to consensus that they're all agree that, okay, for this wallet address, there's a million Filecoin here. And then what happens is the Chainlink nodes will create a report and they'll actually write that data to chain into a smart contract that's constantly updated. So there is a smart contract that can be, it's on Ethereum today, but we could put that proof of reserve, that smart contract, we could create that on any other network and have those nodes report and constantly push that data to that smart contract so that protocols can then read from it, right? So that's essentially how it works. It's updated every 10 minutes. And of course we have, it's not just like one node we're trusting. Of course there's 10 nodes, right? So you could have nodes go down, you could have nodes that could collude, but with our consensus mechanism, and we're able to still report, the actual truth of what's really there in those custodial wallet addresses.
Are you guys bringing on new proof of reserve, like tokens, products, in real life, assets all the time? Like, can I talk a little bit about that process? And I know you talked about Curio. Are there, say, other ones you want to highlight? Maybe not.
Yeah, the one that was interesting was we're seeing a lot with collectibles, right? So not just cards, but artwork. I talked about sports cards are huge right now, just because of the premiums, the values have skyrocketed. We've talked to a lot of tokenization platforms, that might be tokenizing real estate. Real estate seems to be one of the easier ones to tokenize, and there's a couple projects. There's a project out of Miami that we're working with, so there's going to be a lot more. For us, the difficulties is sometimes you don't have multiple independent sources of data, right? And so for us, we have to evaluate the data sources. Can they be trusted? Can we find multiple decentralized data sources to prove that certain things are in line? So those are some of the challenges that we face. We need to be able to sometimes have multiple independent sources, and they're not always available, right? It can't be just trust us. Even though we have multiple nodes reading data, we can't just read from all the same source. Like, you want to have multiple sources to validate, right? Because one source could lie or have give us bad data or false data, and all of a sudden you're under collateralized, or the assets aren't there, or the value's not there, so on and so forth.
So a rigorous vetting and validation by the data team or some other entity inside of Chainlink to even say, yeah, this is a proof of reserve that we could trust, and then put it into our distributed network.
Yeah, it's definitely not a case where we just say, okay, because we do. There's stable coins that come to us and they want to feed us data, but how can you just trust their API as an example, right? Like, usually we push them to a service. There's an accounting firm, traditional accounting firm out there, top 25 accounting firm called Armanino, who has a digital division. And Armanino has automation, and they host an API. Well, they'll automatically log into a centralized stablecoin's bank account every 10 minutes, get that balance. And they grab that data, they put it on an API, and our node operators are able to read that API. And so like the KPMGs of the world, the Deloittes, they're all going to be in this business of providing automation and being able to log into bank accounts for like centralized stablecoins, because even for us, Armanino is a reputable firm, but remember the whole Enron and Arthur Andersen debacle, right? Who audits the auditor? So, we're still evolving it. Like, we realize that, Armanino is just one firm. Yes, they are definitely a major firm, but we want to have multiple auditors be able to log into that account, grab that data so that we're getting it from more than one source, right? So it's an evolvement. Some of the traditional firms are still behind, but the Grant Thorntons, the KPMGs, all those they will all eventually have a digital division dealing with digital assets and working on, attestations that are not quarterly and more manual. They'll be more automated from that perspective.
Do you think it would ever get to a point where you could have unpermissioned node operators that you could actually trust the consensus of whatever groups think they can do it?
Yeah, that's a great point. Chainlink, we're still working on releasing staking in our slashing mechanisms, right? So obviously our node operators go through KYC today, but it's not like you just spin up a node and start participating in these proof of reserve feeds because there needs to be some skin in the game, and staking will be here at some point, and that will allow more permissionless node spinning up, because once you have staking and collateral, you have collateral and skin in the game, there's obviously the ability to be more permissionless, and obviously if a node operator is putting bad data out there, then you have slashing like you would see in other blockchain networks with their validators, where they'll lose some of their collateral for that.
Let's pull back. We've talked a lot about proof of reserves, but I'm curious, open question to both of you, kind of what's interesting right now? What are you seeing across both CeFi, DeFi, obviously things that are that you can talk about, in the innovative bubble that's happening right now? What's getting your attention?
So I touched on it earlier with interoperability. I think I think you had it right that we're probably in the second inning of crypto, and we don't know how many extra innings there are. But it's really this kind of thing where you have your bank and you have ACH, and some people know what ACH is, and they yeah, I can send electronic transfer, and some of them know how to do wires, and it's all right, that's a little different, but I can try it. It's a little scarier. I can do it. And then some do Swift, and it's well, that's a different thing, kind of like a wire, but further. I don't know. And they're all different systems, and banks have figured out how to get them to all kind of feel the same. You put in a routing number, account number, stuff like that. And we just don't have that luxury in crypto yet. It does not feel the same. It feels the same in that there are numbers in all these different networks, but besides that, it's very different. And you got to go to GitHub and download some wallet that you don't trust and hope that it doesn't steal all your money. And there's just a lot of that stuff that's super scary and different concepts. And interoperability is going to be the thing that kind of abstracts a lot of that complexity, because you having an asset in the ecosystem that you know and trust, you could have Bitcoin in your Ethereum, you could have Ethereum in your Polkadot. Everything is going to be a bit more fluid, everything is going to be a bit more networked, and none of us are going to understand how it actually works, but it does, because tokenized assets in one network will be in the other through a bridge or a centralized organization like Gemini. It's all going to find its way into the best pattern that works in the industry, and you're going to be able to buy and sell and hold different assets in the network that you want, in the DeFi system that you like, and it's all just kind of work. And that's going to take a lot of time and effort to get from where we are today into that reality. But it's got to happen, and it's not going to continue like it currently is, because it's way too hard to use. So we as an industry are going to put in a lot of work to make it more approachable and make it more consistent. And what that is really interoperability. It's just making the things work together better. And it's just hard when you have so many financial incentives in play and making it all make sense and safe. So I think interoperability is probably going to be the thing that.
And when you say interoperability, you're talking the different networks, right? You're talking L1, L2s, EVM, non-EVM. Is that right?
Yeah, it's all blending together now. Before it was L2 or layer 2. Layer 1 is Ethereum. Layer 2 is Polygon, Optimism. Some of those are ones that are they're roll-ups, or they're ZK roll-ups, or there's some other Ethereum something else, cheaper Ethereum. And then they're well, we have an EVM compatible Polkadot. It's well, is that a layer 2? It's its own network. Well, we're a parachain. It's okay, what's a parachain? And then you're okay, so it's kind of like Polkadot consensus mechanism with substrate. Got it. but I could do Ethereum things on it. Well, that seems a lot like Polygon and Optimism. So like, is that an L2? And it all kind of blends together. And that's why like, these kind
For us, they
yeah,
blend together.
Totally. Like I was embarrassingly slow on figuring out what L2s were, and like having the job that I have, and you're sitting in meetings where they're like, "What's our L2 strategy?" I was like, "I don't know. I don't even know what these things do." So like you all figure it out as you go, and they all start to blend together. But like conceptually, why I keep using the term interoperability is because like, there's interoperability between smart contracts, that's ERC20. There's interoperability between like Polygon and Ethereum, that's like layer 2 EVM compatibility. But it's all like, now we have Avalanche that has like the C chain, and they have like other chains that kind of do the same kind of thing, but not all consistently the same, and they're serving different purposes. So like, there are many ways to accomplish the same thing. But ultimately, it's really about representing one asset where you want it and not where it's technically bound. Because you can introduce new things like Reserve and have central organizations like Gemini providing that kind of support. And it could be done through a bridge, like Ren is a good example of like a decentralized bridge between these two. And there's going to be like legacy, traditional finance, sorry, I call it legacy finance. It's a little derogatory, and I try not to do it. Traditional finance assets, it's the same thing. Like, dollars in banks is a different network than dollars in crypto. Like, we call dollars in crypto GUSD and USDC. We call dollars in banks dollars. And it's just connecting different networks. And I think it's going to be really important over the next year.
You hit a topic I love, so I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Can you talk a little bit about composability across those networks, and is that something that you see as near-term, long-term, or possible?
You want to handle it? Because I don't know as much about that.
Yeah, I want to. Bridging to me is fascinating. Having transparent bridging between chains and protocols. It's one of the things we're working on with CCIP. So a good example would be, hey, I have so many friends or family members that come to me that say, hey, can you help me get this token over here? And I want to buy this token, and I have this wallet. To me, when we get to a panacea, would be like, I go to Gemini, I have a Gemini wallet, I buy some Bitcoin, and you know what? I want to deposit it somewhere, or Gemini could even abstract that away, saying, we're going to find you the best yield in the DeFi ecosystem. So we'll deposit it to Aave, and Aave will be able to figure out with transparent bridging, hey, maybe this market on Polygon is providing a higher yield than this market over here on Ethereum, and automatically move the liquidity around, right? I mean, yield aggregators already do that today, right? They move, but why not go a higher layer to the wallet for regular lay users, so they can, what's the promise of DeFi, right? To earn interest off your money versus having negative interest rates, right? But we have to make it easier. So to me, the wallet is the upper layer abstract everything away, but we need bridging for that, right? We need automation and bridging that says, look, all I have to do is decide what I want to come in and buy. Maybe it's stablecoin, and then the wallet starts moving, figuring out which protocols are offering the best yield. Maybe it's this market on this chain, but that all, you have to have bridges for that. Bridges that are safe, secure. You have to have message passing, which again goes through bridges, right? So that's where things like keepers and bridging come in, and I think that's what we'll see. Just like how we have with DEXs, we have like 1inch, right? You have aggregators now to help find you the best route and the best path to do swaps, right? So we'll keep seeing abstraction away where even with bridges, obviously going to be multiple bridge operators for years to come. We'll find the best bridge with the lowest, probably transaction costs, quickest times perhaps, to find the way through the networks to accomplish what the upper layer is trying to do, to make things very simple for users. Right?
There was a cool concept I came across from 0x. I was like kind of new to finance. I worked at Zendesk before crypto, and like I didn't know anything about finance stuff besides just playing with APIs. And I was like, all right, learning about pooled liquidity. Like exchanges are pools of liquidity where you have order books, and you're like, I want to sell at this price. You want to buy at that price. We can trade. And you're like, the whole point of the exchange is to get buyers and sellers in the same room, Wall Street style, and just like start shouting into the room to figure out who wants to buy and sell. And 0x was like one of the first DEXs, I think. Like they kind of invented a lot of it. And they introduced this idea of networked liquidity. That like, it's not so much about pooling the liquidity in one place, it's about connecting everything together into the ecosystem so that whatever asset you have, it can be translated to whatever asset they want. So like if you were, shopping on some website and you're like, I've got a ton of Shiba Inu and they only accept BAT or something, the future will be that like both sides don't know what the other one wants or it has, and the system will just translate it at the fair value at that time. And it's not done through an exchange or a pooled liquidity, it's just networked because like the system is able to translate from one side to the other through hopping through the different like systems.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like order routing, order matching, having disparate, currencies, disparate assets. Yeah, 0x is definitely was far ahead of that. Or even like, if you guys remember, like Ether Delta back in the day was more peer-to-peer, right? It didn't have, it was an off-chain order book. It wasn't some centralized order book. But yeah, we need to make it easier. Even I have to map out sometimes when I move liquidity between chains because sometimes when you go over a bridge, you don't even know if you can get back over the other way, or there's high slippage, or there's no liquidity, and you just get killed in fees, or you don't have gas to spend over there in your wallet. So it's too complex. The promise is there. People want to. That's why we have wrapped assets coming into Ethereum, right? You talk about capital efficiency and wanting to. You have this Bitcoin that's worth something, or this Filecoin, and you want to capture some additional interest, but we've got to make it easier to make it more seamless for regular everyday users. Even we struggle with it.
I like that you're tying it back to kind of our first part of the conversation of interoperability. There's this Filecoin world, there's this Ethereum world, and how do we make that interoperable? And how can we bring liquidity and power from one network to the other? I think that's cool. Totally agree with you, and gosh, I hope we are in the first inning because it's complicated for all of the people who I work with, on just as being a user. And I would my dream I would love to see everything kind of slip behind, and you not even realize that a application, a dApp, protocol is using 2 or more networks. I think that's going to be a magical moment where I didn't even know it was on Polygon. I thought it was on Ethereum. So I agree with you. Did you have anything that you wanted to add? Kind of like
that was a great point. I was just thinking out loud too. For users, that the app that they're using, they don't even know if it's running on a blockchain. Should they even care? Just like today with public cloud or SaaS apps, do they really care? Where it's running? Do they know where it's running? That's the point.
Only when the cloud goes down for a day.
But at some point we hope to see decentralized drop from decentralized finance. It's just finance, and dApps are just apps, and users don't really care what's under the covers as long as it's transparent, it's audible, and it's available and they can consume it, right?
Yeah, I would add to this kind of discussion of what gets me excited, the future and all that kind of things is, and I have to limit to what I know is public, so I don't get fired. So I'll talk about things that everyone knows. I think what we've seen and witnessed in the ENS world is super fascinating, and that's cool momentum. And just watching even Jack double down and Block at Square around identity, and kind of what they're doing, I think is super fascinating because I don't know my address by heart, and it's going to be making these applications be much more transparent. And then second would be just kind of watching the momentum around how these DAOs are evolving. And you see these NFT projects that are that are powered by DAOs and that are kind of be generative over time based on these DAOs, and you start seeing so many different other use cases. Watching community, we're all here because we are a community, and watching that community be on chain is just super exciting to me. So that's kind of my selfish plug on what I get excited about.
There's you touched on with what Twitter and Block and all of them are doing. I talked to Parag over there that was work with Blue Sky, and I had a hard time following what their vision was because it's just so so much of the stuff we do is so caught up in finance. It's so wound up in dollars and valuation and assets and stuff like that. But decentralized computing and blockchains represent a bigger change than that. And I'm not gonna get into it because that's not really what we're here to talk about, but like most of the time when people start getting into it, they're like, oh, I could make a lot of money from this. This seems cool. And then they learn a bit more about it and they're like, oh, this seems like it's like a more efficient way of doing things. And they eventually get to a point where you're like, oh, like I could participate in Twitter without anyone knowing who I am and no corporation profiting from my data. How did I get here? And like, it's a lot to get into, but like, they're so much further than I am in terms of the concepts around like verifying the authenticity of a journal report or something, like the source coming from a verifiable route through publication, like applications of blockchains that are far outside the realm of finance. And like you don't often run into those kinds of conversations in this space because everybody's talking about finance things. But it's being worked on now, and like stuff that I had a hard time following, to be honest.
I do hope that the ecosystem's working on more than just finance, right? It's just the most obvious, like first, high friction, like difficult, like incumbents are in there, right? I think the biggest key for me was I was shocked at how many software engineers were like level 5 finance experts when I came in and started working professionally in blockchain. They were schooling me, and I have a finance background, and they were schooling me on their just knowledge of finance. You're absolutely right. All these other domains that blockchain has the opportunity, but there's not a lot of focus yet. Great segue. Let's kind of peel that onion back and probably make this one of the last questions that we talk about is, okay, years from now, 1 year from now, 5 years from now, even beyond, what's your forecast, what's your thought around kind of where the blockchain space evolves?
So I've done a good amount of recruiting in my day, especially at Coinbase. Just like so many conversations with people, like every single one of them was like, oh, I don't have a background in crypto. And it's like, nobody has a background in crypto. It's okay, like we'll figure it out. But you'd run into people that, you know, it's like a scary space to get into because like it's a lot of things that you don't understand with a lot of money being thrown around, and it can be really scary. And they'd be kind of on the fence thinking it might be a flash in the pan, and they're like, I don't know if I want to get into an industry that I'm going to, you know, is going to go under in a year or two. And I would start to talk about, you know, some of the stuff I just touched on, that like I think it might take 10 years, you know, it might take a bit longer, but like when I think about like TCP, which is like the transport layer for the internet, in like the late 80s, early 90s, you're sending documents around on Yahoo, Google isn't out yet, and like it's like really basic stuff of sending a document from one place to another. And like 10, 20, you know, 25 years later, we've got TikTok. And it's like, well, how did that happen? How do we go from such a simple thing over here with TCP and we go to TikTok and Instagram and these like applications that are so far removed from TCP that the people using it have no clue that that is involved whatsoever? Well, like, I remember when I was working on this stuff early on, like there was a thing called like congestion window. Like if one person was sending too many requests through TCP, they could literally take down the internet. And so they introduced this thing called congestion window, which is like if one person's sending too many, they get ratcheted back so that they're not doing it so much, and the internet stays up. But that was happening at the start of the internet. Like one person was taking the whole thing down. That happens in crypto now. Like we have weird stuff that happens, and all of a sudden Solana isn't working. It's like, well, why did that happen? Let's make sure it doesn't happen again. But we're in the stage of just figuring it out. And I don't know like what TikTok for crypto is gonna be, but like in 20 years, it's gonna be unrecognizable. Like this stuff is gonna be so commoditized and so, you know, the way it works that we are going to be doing things with this technology that we can't even think of right now.
Yeah, for me, when I look at the space, I look at a lot of the inefficiencies and frustrations of everyday life, right? You know, we can look at the GameStop debacle, the GME debacle, and how frustrating that was to everyday investors, right? Not being fair to them, not being able to sell. We look at, you know, why does DeFi exist? You know, there are sound money people who are tired of leaving their, you know, doing the right thing by saving money, but, you know, earning negative interest, right? Or just frustrations with the banking system in general, how long it takes to transfer money. Like you look at payments. So for me, it's like wherever there's major pain points, a lot of those could potentially be solved by blockchain, right? I mean, like a good example is counterparty risk. You know, we look at holding titles. That industry is ripe for disruption. It's very important to be able to, you know, offset, you know, or have counterparty risk, but the promise of blockchain can deliver that much more efficiently in a trustless manner where you're not paying fees over and over, you know, when you have to transfer, you know, a real estate title or someone's holding an auto loan, whatever that is, right? So when you look at some of these industries that have just, they've had people for a long time and they haven't really improved their service because they just have people, you know, kind of stranglehold and they're not providing the service anymore. That's where, you know, I see blockchain and smart contracts in general, I believe will be obviously very disruptive, right? To some of those industries that probably deserve disruption or deserve to be, you know, upset because they haven't really taken care of users' needs or, you know, come through with good customer service. And we could probably rattle off a lot of use cases, right? Where there's so much inefficiency out there that, you know, that blockchain can solve. Voter fraud, just doing recounts, like why can't we just put that on a blockchain? Like, that's just crazy actually to think about, you know, here we are in almost 2022 and we're still having challenges just with that alone, right?
Yeah, I heard, so remittances I think is going to be a huge use case. It's sending, you know, people come to America or a country and then they send money home. And I think MoneyGram and Western Union, they enable cross-border payments, on average take like 11% or something ridiculous. And I was talking to Libra back in the day and they were like, look, if we can remove that to pennies on the dollar, the amount of money going through remittances and being, you know, pulled up from the middleman, if we could reduce that to zero, we would effectively double the national foreign aid budget of the United States. It's incredible. Like, it's just, there's so much fat in there that like this stuff can really make an impact.
Yeah, and for me, I'm not against Web 2.0 technology or middleman. It's just that if you're not providing a service, you know, if it's unfair, I mean, people are going to feel if it's unfair, it's not warranted, and you know, at some point, yeah, they're going to be ripe for disruption. Somebody will come up with another solution if you're not doing right by your users and the community.
And what you just said, I don't want to misquote it, so do your own research here, obviously, is, you know, on the like remittances with MoneyGram, like you're already seeing players like Stellar partner with some of these guys, and you're already starting to see that first leg in that world, and you're going to see more and more of it. Yeah, I think my contribution to this over the last 9 or so years around, you know, family dinners and such, I've always been, you know, a Bitcoin, a crypto, a blockchain can solve that problem guy. So I'll steer away from that conversation. And I'll say, I think the trend that we're seeing in so much talent in Web 2, be so interested, you guys and gals are here for a reason. So much of that talent is starting to kind of like be interested in actually being a contributor, not just on the sidelines. And I don't think it's binary. It's not Web 2 goes away, Web 3 takes over. It's definitely like tech is tech, and we're all here solving really cool problems. But the cool talent that we're seeing is an influx. That's what gets me excited about blockchain, because there are folks that are working on cool Web 2 problems right now that are not yet working on Web 3 that's going to unlock just not just innovation, but invention. And that's like fascinating to me.
Yeah, the more you work in the space, you realize decentralization is a gradient. And like without Web 2 technologies, we couldn't use Uniswap. Like people don't know how to interact with smart contracts. You need to have some of the familiar niceties of the ways that we use the internet, and they shouldn't go away. Like, it's okay to have centralization. I know that I'm the centralized guy up here saying that, but like, in my experience, like, there are specific benefits that you get from centralization and specific benefits you get from decentralization. And like, we need to find the right path to balance the two so that we can have the experience we're accustomed to and still get the benefits of decentralization.
There's no CeFi or DeFi maxi world, I believe. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Web3 stack up and down, I mean, there's a lot of key pieces that are missing, right? So for some of the more interesting dApps that will be built in the future, of course, they're going to still rely on a lot of Web2 technologies for sure, absolutely.
And AWS.
yeah, exactly.
Guys, I've had a great time getting to chat some DeFi and CeFi stuff with you. I appreciate you sharing what you can and being transparent. And
How about some questions from the audience?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, first of all, love that the attention is beyond DeFi apps and what blockchain can do on a broader scale. My question is actually relatively simple. You mentioned Web3 at the end, but to tag on to your question of in 10 years, what do we call this? Is it crypto? Is it blockchain? Is it Web3? Where do you see this getting described in a one-word answer? I'm sorry,
I mean,
more than one.
It'll be versions of trustless networking. Like right now, we have like trusted hosts where like Google makes sure nobody messes with the database. That they're trusting that network to manage it. There's just gonna be less of that, and it'll accomplish a lot of the same things. There'll be a lot of things it won't be able to accomplish fully, but you're gonna have options as a user to say like, I want more privacy, I want more control, I want self-sovereignty, I want censorship resistance. And for those reasons, I'll choose this product, which has those characteristics, or I can continue using the existing product that might have a, more pleasant UI or something like that.
Describe those characteristics. Is it Web3? I mean, we talked about mobile. We talked about.
Most people didn't realize it was called Web 2. Like there was a Web 2 conference I went to 8 years ago. My mom has no idea it's called Web 2. So while there may be a word, I don't know that it's going to be a generalized word that most people know.
Could it be crypto, blockchain, or Web3? I guess is the thing that
I mean, blockchain is even getting outdated. Like it's not necessarily blocks. So it's more about like the characteristics of I think there's a lot of Web 1 and Web 2 blending, and there's very much like you could see like a GeoCities page, and that's definitely Web 1.
I think a characteristic that's going to stand out, unless this gets, I can't predict the future, but people are going to talk about their wallet, right? Like that's the top of funnel for basically most crypto DeFi. It starts with the wallet, and I think that would stand out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I definitely see a hybrid world. There'll be a melding of Web 2, Web 3. But again, as a user, do I really care or should I know? Or, I mean, maybe you should know, but again, I agree with the sentiment. We need to abstract away at the top layer. Where does that really start today? It's at a wallet, right? And that wallet could have, NFTs. It could have tokens. It could have NFT that represents your information. So you get to decide what you share versus, all these, your information in 200 different databases, right? For all the sites you log into and provide that.
I think Web3 is differentiated because the user controls it. Web 2 is kind of like the platform level. And by the way, Google also gets hacked. That's why we've gone to decentralized systems that control the actual data with DAOs and also financial wallets. When you have final control on a system like SETI at home or decentralized processing system, that allows you to have the final word. That's what the differentiation on Web3 is. Back to your point you were making earlier, one of the questions I want to make it, there are people actually doing finance stuff. A company did $4 billion in property in the Bay Area. I think they're called Red Sand. They have this huge office that just dropped in Oakland. And they've done cities like Fresno where they're refinancing all the solar in the city based on using their pension fund, which the value is going down on. So they're financing solar on every building there that they can get access to for the future revenue. And they're creating basically a decentralized coin that gets a return on it, which is better than the actual stock and other stuff in the pension fund. So there are some moves kind of moving in that way. What I have to ask you is, what are the issues around Oracle with security for like post-quantum security, and what are the speed so we can actually commoditize? Because what you're talking about is commoditizing like any other commodity in like a real world, international commodity market that we do with high frequency trading. Because that's when you can tell what the price of an asset is in the term of clearing. The question people need to really discuss is what's the clearing time and what's the chance of me clearing in a transaction, especially a multi-tiered, multi-stop transaction, my actual return. That's the thing that if DeFi wants to win, they have to give trust in and timeline that's trustable when the financial markets don't. Because right now, companies like Abra, they started out in payments around the world. PayPal does it around the world. It'll guarantee you get your money in 2 days or whatever the timeline is. The question I have is, can I trust that some power controls, centralized power, is going to stop it when they don't like it, like they do with the stock market, or like they did with my guys who crushed those terrible little hedge funds and were coming for the rest of those bastards. Yeah, that's the question and the real promise of DeFi. Do you give power to the people, and if they do, they'll trust you with their money and other assets and other commodities.
So I'll touch on a few points. I think that there's always going to be space for both. Like, there are really good things about DeFi, but there are going to be some things that CeFi will just do better. And honestly, a lot of stuff I don't even know. Like, I'm not sure how those commodities markets works or Forex markets work. I'm guessing it's going to need more than what we can do on DeFi for a long time. And even if DeFi could do it someday just as well, maybe we should do it, maybe not. Like, I don't know. I don't have like complete and utter distrust for all and every society. I think that there are systems that can work that are centralized. But I think that the areas where you do see harms in our society that can be addressed through decentralization should be the things we prioritize. And I think that's what we're seeing happening in the space now. Like, you can have self-sovereignty and avoid, some government telling you that you can't make that transaction or taking your funds out of your account. They can't do that if you have the private key, which is where a lot of these people get benefit from it today. And I think that, like, as the technology matures, we're going to continue to find more utility cases that are going to get adoption because they get real value out of it. But we're not going to decentralize everything for the sake of decentralizing everything.
Well said.
Hey guys, thanks again for hosting this meetup. I have a broader question around what are some of the biggest challenges you see for developers and product leaders in building dApps? Is it scalability and reliability with nodes? Are block daemon and alchemy really good value adds from what you guys have seen? Or just curious, what do you guys have noticed?
Take that? Even though I think obviously, you need to have strong solidity skills, but there's also patterns. Just like there's patterns in software development and Web 2, there are patterns and best practices as well with writing smart contracts, right? And so it's not just having solidity skills. Yes, there's a major shortage of solidity skills, right? But as far as like infrastructure, there's a lot of managed infrastructure players out there that, Coinbase bought Bison Trails, there's Anchor, there's a lot of, that's probably the least of the concerns. It's more about, just general knowledge of smart contracts. Obviously, some, on Solana, they're not smart contracts, they're programs, right? Different language. So that presents itself a barrier as well in terms of attracting developers, right? But of course, just like anything, development talent is not always easy to find.
I want to touch on that too. So there are a number of you in Web 2, and one of the hardest things about technology is not the technology piece. It's building stuff that people want and love and distribution, right? So don't miss first principles unless you just want to go cool, like hack something on the side and just to learn. If you're actually talking about building value in the ecosystem, it's really understanding. I'm a PM, so I talk about what the user really cares about, build towards that, run towards where people are going. So that would be the first piece. The second is there are differences in the Web 2 and Web 3 software development lifecycle. First of all, there is most likely a layer of security that you haven't had to take into consideration before. Don't go launch something and expect people to pour money into it and don't go through and not go through the audit cycle. Like, don't skimp on those things. We've all read wrecked news on what that can turn into. So understand that there is development differences, not just languages and tech stacks. And we don't have the benefit of a lot of the tooling that exists in the Web 2 space, the build systems and just kind of the things that we take for granted that have been built by ourselves over the last 10 years for ourselves. There's still a lot of opportunity there that is still a little rough around the edges.
These guys know way more about that than I do, so I'll leave it.
Oh, hey, so to me, it seems like DeFi is just like a big circle jerk between people, crypto enthusiasts that want to trade and do certain cool things. And, coming from outside into it, I've noticed that there isn't really a good onboarding process for the typical retailer? Like, depending how great the idea is, right? You know, like, plenty of people told me about their DAOs, cool, right? But like, how do we incentivize people in the retail users who essentially won't be able to tell the difference from their abstraction in terms of like what the difference between centralization and decentralized applications are? How do we incentivize them to move over to the DeFi or decentralized space?
Complimented you at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I don't want to be cynical, but I think you're a little right. Like, it's kind of like, this is why we can't have nice things. Like, there's such cool stuff happening in DeFi, and same thing happened with ICOs. And like, you'll see these bull markets come after traction on a utility case, where like all of a sudden it's like, oh, BAT, that's such a good application for blockchains. They do an ICO, that's so cool. The idea of fundraising through the token, such a neat idea. And then like you got like dented coin 6 months later. And like the stuff happens where when there's so much money to be made, you attract a lot of people that are not there to do the things that are happening in the industry. And the same thing's happening in DeFi through governance token issuance. Like a lot of it isn't really backed by utility. Like it's not backed by value, in my opinion. But there is real value in there. So like, how do you extricate the real stuff from the rest? And it's really hard, and usually the market will find a way. But in the meantime, like you said, like how do you approach it, or like how do you find some way to like get meaningfully involved with it? And usually, in my experience, it's the earlier projects, like it's the ones that were doing it for multiple years, like working away at the technology to figure out how to get the thing to work. And then once you saw real traction, like DeFi was getting real traction at the end of 2020. It's like real TVL getting in there and like actually seeing something work. And then a whole bunch of other stuff showed up. So like, kind of look at history maybe and like see who's doing interesting things to get to the point of friction, and see what the kind of things that they're doing, so that like you mentioned, Aave, like really great project. They were around doing a lot of stuff before Shiba DEX showed up. You know, like it's an interesting space where newer stuff can be sampling from older stuff, and like SushiSwap sampled from Uniswap. They went their own way and actually are doing interesting things now. So like, start from the beginning and work your way towards like what interesting things have happened along the way, and you'll usually be in a good group of projects.
We're still in the 10,000 hours to become an expert phase, and that's just the truth. And it's expensive 10,000 hours. It goes back to I look forward to all of the new application developers that are building on all the composability and all this new innovation to make, you know, gas fees go down and the friction go down. I'm hoping that the usability improves based on the new influx of things getting built and the momentum we see around interoperability.
I have a question to you guys. Do you have a duty or obligation to report on people that swap coins from one to another on your networks, and identify their identity to their wallets? Because one of the challenges I'm facing is to calculate when you swap one coin to another is to how to report on that, right? And it's in a it's really hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean, there's organizations like CipherTrace and Chain Analysis that do those types of things, right? But unless that user makes a mistake and registers with ENS or something, I mean, it's probably pretty hard to identify who that person is or that entity, unless they have to volunteer that information, right? But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of projects that institutional projects or that use CipherTrace or Chain Analysis to, they have a list of wallet addresses that may be associated with terrorism or that are blacklisted, right? Or maybe be associated with perhaps a hack where funds were traced back to or transited through.
That'll also probably be impacted by how the travel rule rolls out. Like, depending on what regulation comes through and what you can and can't do, depending on what type of organization you are, that'll dictate a lot of like how much your identity follows you while you do blockchain things.
Your topic is relevant and only going to grow.
Let's give the panelists a round of applause. We have many, many more events planned, so definitely join the meetup group. Follow smart_contract on Twitter. Thanks again for coming. Hope to see you again soon.